Here are the products I use when ballasting my N-Scale Kato track. So the first thing I do is I take Woodland Scenic's static tack and a flat brush, just like this. Okay, and I paint the sides of the rail, of the ballast, with the glue. Good amount. A nice thick amount along the sides, okay? Then the next thing I do is I take a little bit of a finer brush and I get in between the ties, like here, 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 and I get a good amount, a good thick amount. And I only work maybe within a 12-inch, 10 to 12-inch area, because that glue on the sides will dry fast. You want to get it tacky so that you can come back and ballast only the sides. Do one side at a time, maybe this side and then that side. So you glue this and you take a pinch. I take a pinch. I never use any shakers for my ballast. I take a pinch in my hand and I start to hit the side, and then I try to come up to the top using minimal amounts, only to cover a good amount of that gray with the shade of ballast I'm using. Now let's say you have ballast laying on both sides. We haven't done the middle yet. Let's say you have ballast on both sides, but you may have some sitting on top of the ties. I take this same brush and I just try to gently, knock off whatever I can off those ties, as much as I can, to get a little bit of a clean look. Then what I do is I come back with Woodland Scenic's Scenic Cement and an eyedropper, and I go over it to seal it even more so. So you have that ballast that's sitting on that glue, but with a little time to dry now, you can come back and I kind of hit in between the ties, and that glue kind of pours down and it starts to expand and soak into the ballast as you go along the way. So you get a nice, so now you have both sides of your ballast covered with enough amount of glue. And then, sometimes you might see some little patches where you might have missed, and you can go back now and clean them up. And a lot of times, if you just, like I said, lightly sprinkle and try to get over those areas you might have missed just a little bit. Never do too much at one time. Just work it slow. It's tedious, but it's definitely worth it. And then a lot of the times that ballast may soak right in because you just eye dropped that whole, 10 to 12-inch section. It might soak in. If it doesn't, you can always just tap it again with a little bit of glue with the eyedropper and the Scenic Cement. Now I hit the center of the track, all of this area. I use the eyedropper and the Scenic Cement again, but what I do is I kind of go in between the ties, and I don't put any ballast on yet. I go in between the ties as careful as I can with just a light push of glue so that it just pools in between the ties from one rail to the next. And I'll do that, right? So I'll do that for the 10, 12 inches that you're working. That glue is pooling in there. It starts to soak in a little bit. It starts to run down. And after it does, I go back and I get my ballast and I lightly sprinkle down the middle, just enough to get in between the ties. And you'll always have some sitting on top of the ties. And of course, nobody's going to be perfect, but I try to keep as much of the glue dropper with the glue coming out of it off of the rails, so that when you comes time, you'll see you'll have some ballast sitting on top of the rails. You'll have more within the ties. I'm sorry, not rails, but it'll be sitting on top of the ties. So what I'll do is I'll just go back with this little brush, this little bit of a wide brush, and just kind of, and it's perfect for N-Scale, just kind of tap the tie so that it falls in between the ties, and I try to clean them up as best as I can that way. And sometimes you may have little stragglers of ballast, and I'll go back even with an X-Acto, just kind of that fine tip, and just kind of knock them off the tie and in between the ties. So that's my process. This here is kind of an example of what it ends up looking like. Sometimes I'll go back with some different colored paint and paint the ties different shades, darker, lighter. And I might even come back into the grassy areas where the ballast might have run too far away from the track and try to build up some weeds going up the sides of the roadbed, and then just hit them with an eyedropper. Everything is pretty much with an eyedropper what I do as far as the ballast. So, and that's it. That's my process.